Ole Miss's Portal Class is the most important thing to take away from SEC Media Day.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Rebel Nation. I am your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media and a former staff member at Ole Miss. Today's episode dives into how Lane Kiffin, the Portal King, has created and crafted a roster that the national media is buzzing about. We'll take a closer look at some of their bold predictions and what it means for Ole Miss's season. Stay tuned as we analyze the potential impact of these new players and discuss a heightened expectations season surrounding this team. This is the Locked On Ole Miss Podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. So thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the everydayers that make the show what it is. Don't forget to find a second listen on the network. Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC, Spencer McLaughlin at Locked On College Football. They're in Dallas this week at SEC Media Days. They provide perspectives about college football, the SEC, and of course, Ole Miss as well. So check that out. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. Now let's get into today's show and talk about all things Ole Miss Rebels. The big takeaway that you can have from SEC Media Days, all the teams, there's a ton of storylines surrounding that. In the third segment, we're going to talk about some of the other ones that we're looking forward to. But one of the major storylines is the roster that Lane Kiffin has assembled on Ole Miss's team, and how Ole Miss is in a discussion for a playoff, a Heisman Trophy, national title, all of that stuff. It is because of the roster that Lane Kiffin built whenever he started doing this 2 years ago. We're going to start talking about a conversation that Greg McElroy and Benjamin Watson's had on ESPN Live, College Football Live, one day. But first, let's talk about the way this roster was constructed. And it's a benefit. We always talk all the time about how Lane Kiffin is an early adopter. And him being an early adopter means he has a chance to figure a lot of this stuff out early. Before everybody else gets a little bit of a grasp on it, he can kind of establish a little bit of a lead. And Lane Kiffin did that with the transfer portal, with NIL. This segment of college football that we are currently in, Lane Kiffin is dominating through the transfer portal, NIL, and all that stuff. All the little tricks that he's figuring out how to do, they're probably a year ahead of what other coaches are going to figure out as well. Lane Kiffin has to stay ahead of him, but to this point, he has. This started essentially in 2022, whenever Lane Kiffin got Jaxson Dart and Michael Trigg and Jordan Watkins and Jared Ivey, and those guys transferred to Ole Miss. That's when roster building kind of started happening. And Lane Kiffin started thinking, it's like, hey, we could probably get some depth in the transfer portal windows as well. So that became a primary avenue for roster construction for Lane Kiffin. It started with the class with Trigg and Dart, and is going forward to like the Walker Howard class and all of that. And the ones that you got this year with Walter Nolan, Princely Amamuellen, Chris Paul, all of those players, it is using the transfer portal as a way to build your roster. Let's look at this real quick. Obviously, you have Walter Nolan, transfer portal player. You have Dominic Thomas, a guy that is a walk-on transfer player. Princely Amamuellen, transfer player. Daquan Wright, tight end that was brought in this year, transfer player. Chris Hardy, transfer player. Trey Harris, transfer player. Caden Prieskorn, transfer player. Jordan Watkins, he's another third-year transfer that came in the same year as Jaxson Dart. Juice Wells, transfer player. And, of course, Jaxson Dart, transfer player. Logan Diggs, transfer player. Rashad Amos, transfer player. Ulysses Bentley IV, transfer player. You can see how Lane Kiffin used this transfer portal vehicle to build the greatest roster that anybody that's my age, that's an Ole Miss fan, has seen at Ole Miss. And then you got Henry Parrish, who was a transfer player, but he was also a high school recruited player. Lane Kiffin, through the transfer portal, has built up an absolute monster, and honestly, the national media has started to take note. Whenever you look at College Football Live, a show they have on ESPN, they were talking that Greg McElroy and Ben Watson was talking about Ole Miss. And the question was, can Ole Miss exceed its projected 2024 win total? And then, they just debated that back and forth. Well, it wasn't really much of a debate because they were both on the same side. It said SEC Media Days is come and gone for the Ole Miss Rebels, and all eyes shift now to their current 2024 schedule. They're favored to reach the playoff, but just how good is this team when it comes to a close? FanDuel Sportsbook has the win total at 9.5 for the upcoming campaign, which bet is smarter, the over or the under? That's what they were debating. That topic was on the segment of College Football Live this week as analysts Greg McElroy and Ben Watson took the over or under for win totals among individual SEC teams. Ole Miss came up in the discussion, and both men are buying the preseason hype in Oxford. I'll take the over here. I actually think Ole Miss is probably a 10-2 football team. With what they've added defensively along the line of scrimmage, I think they'll be more well-equipped to handle the circumstances of the challenges of the league, obviously playing off of what Nick Saban said. McElroy pointed out that some of the Ole Miss conference games may not look too daunting on paper, but traveling to LSU, South Carolina, and Florida while hosting Georgia is no laughing matter. Still, it seems like their odds to exceed 9 wins this season is pretty good. Watson echoed this sentiment, believing Ole Miss is in a prime position to capitalize on not only the new college football playoff model, but a divisionless SEC. If they manage expectations like we've talked about before, I think this team can do what it did last year. It took, I look at the Georgia game at home, I say that's probably the only game on their schedule without knowing anything that's going to happen throughout the season where I would say they would not be favored. So this is an example of just the general conversation that is happening in the national media. Everybody is excited about what this Ole Miss team could potentially be. And this transfer portal and Lane Kiffin using it to build the roster, I think has everybody even more excited because this is going to provide a variability in roster building, because forever it was all about high school recruiting and you did what you could and you signed your 25 players and you tried to slowly build a roster over time. If this works, there's no such thing as a slow rebuild anymore. If you find somebody that is good in the transfer portal, that understands the transfer portal, you can be back very quickly. And we will find out this year if Ole Miss can take it to the next level with the national media, because if Ole Miss makes the playoff, this transfer portal model for roster building becomes a legit avenue for coaches to take. So places like Oklahoma State, those second-tier top 25 teams that are trying to get up in the playoff hunt, you're going to see them utilize the transfer portal even more. And you'll see guys like Dabo Swinney completely fall out of favor. It wasn't just there. You had Nick Saban talking how on the line of scrimmage, it's the first year that Ole Miss can compete with Georgias and the Alabamas, and they have the guys to do that up front. You had Jordan Rodgers saying that Jaxson Dart was his prediction to win the Heisman Trophy. When you look at how much attention Ole Miss got over the course of this week at SEC Media Days, it is very easy to say that the transfer portal got Ole Miss here. The portal king got Ole Miss here. And when you look at it, when you look at the players that are on the list, and we'll just bring the schedule up, this is what Ole Miss is looking at. And when like Benjamin Watson said the same thing, I think Ole Miss will be favored by kickoff in 11 of the 12 football games. So if it's chalk, it's 11-1. Now, it's not going to be easy. I think Florida has a chance to be good. Georgia obviously is the best team in college football. Oklahoma has talent everywhere. LSU's a talented player. South Carolina is a difficult place to play. I'm not saying that Ole Miss is just going to walk through. I'm saying that Ole Miss should be favored in 11 of the 12 games this season. And a lot of that is roster building. Lane Kiffin deserves a ton of credit because several coaches have tried to build this the old-fashioned way at Ole Miss over the past 20 years. Some would rise up, some would come down, but it was incredibly hard to have a consistent winner at Ole Miss. With double-digit wins this year, which if you just saw the roster, if Ole Miss wins 11, they will. Jaxson Dart will be the winningest quarterback of all time at Ole Miss, but that would be Lane Kiffin winning 10, 11, and what it was, say 11 in his 3 out of his last 4 years. This is a period really similar to what Ole Miss fans call the glory days. When you look at 1957 to 1963, that period of time, Ole Miss is kind of in a window similar to that in modern football. And it is all because of the transfer portal. It is all because of Lane Kiffin's use as an early adopter. And it is all because of that it has all these national media pundits completely just over the moon about what could happen. It should be really interesting for Ole Miss. So coming up next on Locked On Ole Miss, with the offseason finally behind Ole Miss, it is time for Lane Kiffin to flip the script and prove the Rebels are ready to dominate. Do not miss it. Game Time is your place to get Ole Miss football tickets. They have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and the lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets. Views from every seat in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium. You can see exactly what it looks like before you buy the tickets. They have the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection. You can take the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets with Game Time. And now, with the most anticipated football season in Ole Miss history, I might be able to help you out with some tickets. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's all one word for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all of that screaming and shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you each and every single day to bring you the biggest stories without all of that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss news, analysis, opinions, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And there's still time to join the Grove Collective and help Ole Miss football be elite. You can go to thegrovecollective.com and join today. So we talked about the transfer portal and the media hype and all of that in the first segment. But now it is time for Lane Kiffin to flip the switch from off-season to the season, and it's time to get these boys ready to play. Furman is, 42 days or something like that down the road, August 31st. It is time, and it's imperative for Lane Kiffin to earn his paycheck at this point, because this year is going to be about Lane Kiffin earning his paycheck. And his paycheck is going to be earned by handling these expectations and winning games. The benefit for Ole Miss, and I think Lane Kiffin is going to try to mimic Nick Saban as much as humanly possible, in the fact that, you hear people talking about, you don't want to deal with bald guys in their mom's basement making opinions and picks about your team. Don't let that influence the way you feel about yourself. Nick Saban told players that, and I think Lane Kiffin's going to do a similar thing. There's a little bit of disrespect that's out there that if you're looking for bulletin board type material, the ESPN FPI, which is the analytic model, has Ole Miss at around 18. Yes, I mean, you can use that. They have them predicted to win like 7.5 games. You can use that. You have Billy Bowman from Oklahoma talking about basically making fun of Jaxson Dart and saying pick six and all of that stuff. And then you have the thing with Mississippi State just yesterday that was absolutely ridiculous. So there are some tools for Lane Kiffin to play the bulletin board material game. There's not necessarily a Steve Kiner out there, but there's a little bit that you can make it to where, hey, not everybody believes in you and all that, because if you turn on ESPN right now, it's like all Ole Miss all the time. It's absolutely nuts. Ole Miss is getting the treatment that's normally reserved for the Alabamas and the LSUs and the Georgias of SEC football this year, and that's pretty cool. But Lane Kiffin is going to have to flip the switch from the offseason, which Ole Miss undoubtedly won the offseason. Number one transfer portal class, all of the media hype. Ole Miss carried that for 6 months into SEC Media Days. But SEC Media Days, while being the ceremonial start of college football season, it is also the end of the offseason. And that's the point where you just kind of look at what's going on and everything. So this transfer portal class and all the questions that Lane Kiffin has, and people are going to ask questions about chemistry and things like that, but I'm just going to say this right now. Everybody that's worried about chemistry, as long as Jaxson Dart and Jared Ivey and Trey Harris and those guys, JJ Pegues, are the leadership center of the team, I'm not worried about locker room culture or anything like that this season. It's going to take care of itself, because those are some extremely high quality individuals that can do it. But Lane Kiffin is going to have to take all that hype and everything that has happened up until now. Everybody's heard that for 6 to 8 months from rat poison salesmen like me, to flip a switch and to start working towards the season. It becomes business as usual right now. Now, everybody's going to say this is talking season. And, you've probably heard that. This is talking season. And talking season, basically, for me, has been going on since May. So this isn't talking season. This is pre-fall camp season, to where next week we're going to start looking at different storylines and position questions to get ready for fall camp. That's about 2 weeks away, something like that, a little bit less than 2 weeks. And once that happens, and once we get going, we've got Bill Flowers that's going to be an analyst on there. There's a lot of people. I love how much of a lightning rod Bill Flowers is on this program. But he'll come on and talk about what he's expecting. We have John Forcade this year. We are going to be doing some stuff with Brad and Logan as well. We have all the Clarion Ledger beat writer and David Eckert. We have Michael Katz. He's going to come on from time to time. We're going to try and get Zach Berry. We're going to try and have Brian Smith, of course, all the way through signing day. We are going to blow out this football season the best way that we know how. And that is something that should get everybody excited, because this is the most anticipated football season in the history of Ole Miss football. Whenever you have that, the only thing that would be close to this, and I'm serious, close to this, would be the 1970 Archie season, the year that he broke his arm. That would be the only thing that would be close to what this season is for Ole Miss football. It should be a lot of fun, and we'll see exactly how it goes. Up next on Locked On Ole Miss, we'll dive into the biggest storylines from SEC Media Days. We'll find out which other SEC teams they're making waves and what you need to know about the upcoming season. Stay tuned. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV Channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover each and every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV Channels app. Be part of history. Now, it wasn't just all Ole Miss as SEC Media Days. I mean, this is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, so it's obviously what we're going to focus on. But this being the end of the week, I did want to discuss some other things that I noticed. I think it was yesterday, the day before yesterday, Steve Sarkisian, the day that Texas went, was asked a question about the Arkansas game. And anybody that has watched this channel for an extended period of time knows how excited I am about the renewal of the Texas-Arkansas series as a real thing, as a real potential every annual event. I am excited about that. And he was asked the question about Arkansas, and Steve Sarkisian just bluntly said, I think they hate Texas more than they like themselves. Just said it out loud, which is very fun for a coach to say, because in this age without Steve Spurrier and without those guys, there's a chance that in SEC media days, it could all kind of get watered down. But this was not necessarily a shot, because it's true, by the way. What Steve Sarkisian said is true. And the reason I know that it's true is Sam Pittman the next day was asked about it. He's like, yeah, that sounds about right. Arkansas fans basically invented the horns down. Arkansas and Texas was potentially the biggest rivalry in the Southwest Conference. Don't give me Texas versus Texas A&M. Don't give me Texas versus Texas Tech, Baylor, all of those guys. No, I genuinely think the Texas-Arkansas game was a special level of hate. You had Frank Broyles, you had Darrell Royal, the whole 9 yards. And because of that, just lots of animosity got built up to the point where even after Arkansas left for the Southeastern Conference in 1992, and Texas was in the midst of the Southwest Conference falling apart, after that was over, Houston Nutt, by the time he got to Arkansas, which was in the late 90s, it was nearly 10 years, he played a home-and-home versus Texas. I think Arkansas was able to beat Texas in one of those games, and everybody was doing horns down. It was almost jubilant to see Arkansas fans and how they were reacting to beating Texas. So I am excited for this Texas-Arkansas rivalry to be renewed. I am excited for Texas and Texas A&M to be renewed, and we all know exactly what the Red River Shootout is. So understand that these fun rivalries, Texas is going to be in a better state today and this season than they were last season, than they were for the last 10 years, where they only had one rival, one real rival. I mean, we can always talk about Texas Tech. We can always talk about Baylor being a rival, but as a real rival, getting Arkansas back is absolutely money. And the Texas versus Texas A&M game has a chance to be one of the more special football games since the 2017 Egg Bowl, as far as intensity goes. There's some serious animosity that's going on between those two schools, and it will be at least, at a minimum, interesting to see what goes on. Now, other players, Brian Kelly really likes his team. It's one of those things. Everybody's heard me give predictions. Everybody's heard that. But Brian Kelly really likes the team, so we'll have to see exactly how they go. You know, Georgia, of course, is the best roster in all of college football. Kalen DeBoer was fairly impressive as well when he went through it. And, you know, Elijah Drinkwitz was a little bit of a goober, like he always is. But there's probably, let's see, whenever you look at tiers of where they could be, it's like Georgia's national championship or bust. I think Missouri, Alabama, Texas, and Ole Miss are playoffs or bust. And then you have like LSU, Tennessee, and somebody else that can qualify, maybe make it up to the playoffs. And then you have the also-rans in the league. You have half of the SEC that have a legit chance to make the playoff next season, or this season, I should say. So it should be really interesting. Again, once we come back and start talking about it Monday, we're going to start like getting in full camp mode. We're going to do that because it's fun to talk about Ole Miss football. It is fun to think about what could happen. It's fun to think about the possibilities, and everybody knows that this channel is completely 100% about fun. I want following Ole Miss football. I want watching Ole Miss football to be a fun experience. So we should be pretty excited about all of that. So anyway, thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen of the day. We have the most perspectives surrounding Ole Miss sports, and it's one of the many reasons why we are the number one Ole Miss podcast out there. And thank you, by the way, for your support. But for your second listen, check out Locked On's new venture, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV Channels app. And for those of you on YouTube, we're going to send you there right now. Enjoy the weekend, everybody. Hotty toddy.